Good morning to all the students who are watching this video. I am Madam Won Chong-mi from SNK St. Elizabeth Cebu. Today, I would like to share with you about the techniques in answering the Science Paper 2, Section A for the Form 5. Before I continue discussing about the science process skill that usually asked in Section A, I would like to share with you the elements distribution and also the marks for Section A. So there are 4 items, or means 4 questions for Section A, and then each item, the allocated marks is 5 marks. And then they were tested on the 3 elements here. That is the first one, science process skill. Number 2, manipulative skill, and also number 3 is application. So for each item here, that is allocated 1 marks for tested the application. That is the soalan mengaplikasi, yeah. And then the total marks for section A is 20 marks. Next, we look at what are the preparation in answering the section A. So in answering the questions for section A, the student need to use the science process skill and also the manipulative skill to answer the questions. So one science process skill can be tested more than 1 times. For example, question number 1, they ask about the hypothesis. Maybe in questions number 3, they will repeating asking hypothesis. So the best preparation is practice through the exercise. So persediaan yang paling bagus adalah melalui latih to be. And then the answer for section A usually can be found in the questions either secara tersurat atau tersirat. Now we look at the science process skill questions they always ask in the exam. So the first one is the variable. So you need to know the 3 types of variables here. That is the manipulated, responding, and constant. Number 2 is hypothesis. Number 3, observation. Number 4, inference. Number 5, prediction. Number 6, classifying. Number 7, communicating. Number 8, relationship, and then the last one is operational definition. So the 9 science process skill here are the type of questions they always ask in section A. So the first science process skill is the variable, right? So you need to know how to write the variables. So when you write the variables, you must write the parameter for each variable. Apparatus cannot be considered as variable. So for example, materials, you cannot write the materials as the variable. So you need to put the parameter in front, like the types of material, the mass of the material, sent to the nutrient broth, yeast, and the metal. You must put the parameter in front. So this is a few examples of the parameter for the solid, liquid, and also gas. So the solid, for example, the metal, you can write down the mass of metal, the height of the weight, the size of the tin, the type of nail, the presence of air, the depth of the dent. Okay, this is a few examples that I listed for the solid, the parameter for the solid. And then for the liquid, okay, they have a few here. The first one is the volume, and then concentration, and also the type. Okay, type of solution. And then for the parameter for the gas, like the hydrogen gas, carbon dioxide gas, oxygen gas, we only can use the parameter here, volume. So the 3 variables here, manipulated, responding, and a constant variable. How to differentiate between these 3 variables? For the manipulated variable, usually we find out what is the difference or what is the change in the diagram. Usually the question will given you 2 diagrams, so you find out what is the difference between the 2 diagrams. And then for the constant variable, usually we find out what are the similarity, what are the same type of apparatus they are using. And then for the responding variable, usually this is referring to the result of the experiment. What do you observe at the end of the experiment? So actually these 3 variables we can easily identify through the fields here, the first one is through the diagram and then through the table, or we can get the answer from the graph, and also we can get the answer from the questions ataupun statement. So we look at how we identify the three variables through the diagram. So if the questions given you the two diagram, that is the petri dish P and petri dish Q, right? So for these two petri dish, you can see what is the difference there, right? Or what is the change there? You can see 0 Celsius degree, and then the other one Q is 37 Celsius degree. So in order to write the variable, you can just write down 0 Celsius degree and 37 Celsius degree as the manipulated variable. Or you can write down the temperature of the place as the manipulated variable. For the responding variable, you need to write down what do you observe or what you can see from the diagram after you carry out this experiment. So you can see the first petri dish P, okay, you can see no colony there, right? The other colony. And then for Q, you can see the number of colony here is 4, so you can write down 4 colony. Okay, for the good student, I think you know how to write. This is the number of colony, which is referring to the responding variable. And then for the constant variable, for two petri dish here, you need to find out what is the similarity substance they use. So you can see this is the agar nutrient, right? So the agar nutrient, you cannot write down agar nutrient only as the variable. You need to write down the parameter. So parameter for the agar nutrient is the volume of the nutrient agar as the constant variable. Next, we move on to this example. Also identify the variable from the diagram. So if the questions given you the diagram like this, 3 test tube, which containing the nutrient broth and the bacteria. So the manipulated variable, you need to find out what is the difference, right? What is the difference? So this one, the first one, they kept in the fridge, and then Q kept at the room temperature, and then R kept in the 60 Celsius degree. So actually these three referring to the temperature, right? Okay, so responding variable at the end of this experiment, what can you observe from the nutrient broth that you put into the test tube after weeks, for example? So you can see the nutrient broth will become cloudy, right? So you can write down the cloudiness of the nutrient broth as the responding variable. And then for the constant, you need to find out what is the similarity there. So you can find out from the test tube here, you can see they have the same volume of the nutrient broth and also same type of bacteria. So for the constant variable here, you can write down the volume of nutrient broth, or you can write down the type of bacteria. Okay, we continue with the next example. This is about to study the effect of the acid and also alkali towards the latex. So the difference there, one is using the ethanol acid, the other one using the ammonia solution. And then at the end of the experiment, after the 30 minutes, you can see one of the beaker containing the latex coagulate, and then the other one still remain in the liquid form. So what is the manipulated variable here? So manipulated variable that you can write down here, you can write down the type of solution added into the latex. And then for the responding, you can write down the coagulation of latex ataupun pengumpalan latex. And then for the constant, you need to find out the similarity. So from the diagram, you can see that the volume here, they are the same, right? Both beaker, they have the same volume of latex. So you write down the volume of latex as the constant variable. Now we continue with how to identify the variable from a table. So if the questions given you the table like this, they have given you two row like this. Upper row usually referring to the manipulated variable, and the lower row usually referring to the responding variable. And then if the questions given you two column like this, the left column usually referring to the manipulated, and then the right column usually referring to the responding variable. So we look at the example here. So they have the substance given and also the boiling point. So remember, the left column referring to the manipulated and the right column referring to the responding. Same to this one, the upper column referring to the manipulated and the lower column here referring to the responding variable. So if the question they're asking about the manipulated and responding, and the questions given you the table like this, so it's very easy for you to score 2 marks for the variable. So we look at how to identify the variable from a table. So if the questions they given you the table like this, so the upper row referring to the type of water sample, we have the water sample A, B, and C, right? And then for the lower row, have the time taken for the color of solution X to decolorize, right? So usually, just now I mentioned already, the upper row referring to the manipulated variable and the lower row referring to the responding variable. And then send to this one, if the questions given you the column like this, the left column referring to the manipulated variable and the right column referring to the responding variable. Let's look at a few examples here. So the first example, the upper row referring to the concentration of penicillin, and then the lower row referring to the diameter of clear area, right? So which one is manipulated, which one is responding? I think all of you know the answer already. So the upper one referring to the manipulated, which is the concentration of penicillin. And then the lower row is the diameter of the clear area referring to the responding. The next example, the left column, okay, referring to the manipulated, and then the right column referring to the responding, which is the size of bacterial colony after 24 hours. Next, we look at how to identify the variable from the graph. So if the questions didn't given you the diagram, didn't given you the table, but they given you the graph like this. So how we are going to identify the variables through the graph? So usually they have two bars like this, Y axis and then the X axis, right? So you just need to remember about the ringgit Malaysia. Okay, so you can see from here, this one referring to the R referring to the responding variable, which is the Y axis. And then for the M is referring to the S axis, referring to the manipulated variable. So you ingat ringgit Malaysia if the question asking you to identify the variable from the graph. Let's look at this example. So the questions given you the graph. So you need to know already. Just now I mentioned already. You remember about the ringgit Malaysia, right? So this one, Y-axis referring to the R referring to the responding variable. So the responding variable is the diameter of clear area. And then for the X-axis, okay, M, right? So M referring to the manipulated variable. So the concentration of antibiotic is the manipulated variable here. So just remember ringgit Malaysia. Easy, right? Next, we move on to how to identify the variables from a questions. So if the questions are given to you like this, you need to know how to identify the manipulated and the responding from the questions. So the example here, to study the effect of, okay, effect of what? Of the manipulated variable on responding variable. Okay. So this is the example of the questions to study the effect of the thinness of the convex lens on focal length. So the thinness of the convex lens here referring to the manipulated, and then the focal length referring to the responding variable. Next, we look at another example. So the table shows the result of experiment to study the effect of temperature on the bacterial growth. So the temperature here, after the effect of, is the temperature. So temperature referring to the manipulated variable, and the responding variable referring to the bacterial growth. So another example here is to study the effects of the temperature on the rate of reaction between the sodium thiosulfate solution and the sulfuric acid. So you can see the words that underline temperature is referring to the manipulated, and the rate of reaction between the sodium thiosulfate solution and the sulfuric acid referring to the responding variable. Okay, remember this one referring to the manipulated variable referring to the temperature, and then the rate of reaction referring to the responding variable. Easier means you can identify the two variables from the statement or from the questions that given. The next science process skill that I'm going to discuss with you is how to write the hypothesis. So when you write the hypothesis, you need to relate the manipulated variable and the responding variable. Mesti ada hubung kait di antara pemboleh ubah dimanipulasi dengan pemboleh ubah bergerak balas. And then no words such as to study. Okay, tiada perkataan seperti untuk mengkaji ya. If you write the word to study, this referring to the M. And then the hypothesis that can be tested. So the hypothesis that you write must be the hypothesis that you can test it. So for example, I want you to look at this one. So this is the example of hypothesis you can write. We can use the comparative words. Okay. So the comparative verb here can be the longer, higher, bigger, smaller, and so on. And then you can see from here, you must relate the manipulated variable with the responding variable. Okay. And then you can also write this one as the time increases, the volume of gas increases. Okay. So manipulated and responding variable must have in writing the hypothesis. So when you write the hypothesis, you cannot write the sentence and then you need to avoid the vague statement. Vague statement means elakkan ayat yang kurang jelas maksudnya. For example, this one. So the correct hypothesis we write is alloy is harder than pure metal. You cannot write like this. Different metals show different hardness. Okay, so this is the incorrect hypothesis, and then the correct hypothesis you need to write like this. Alloy is harder than pure metal. So alloy and pure metal here referring to the manipulated. Harder here referring to the responding variable. Okay. We look at next example. Look at this. So this is the experiment to study the effect of different concentrations of antibiotic on the bacterial growth. So look at the diagram here. You can see from here the antibiotic disc with the low concentration and the antibiotic disc with the high concentration. And then you can also see the clear area they produce by the high concentration and also low concentration. So what is the first step you need to do? You need to identify the manipulated and the responding variable first. Okay. So the correct hypothesis you can write like this. So the higher the concentration of antibiotic, the less the growth of bacteria. Okay, or you can write down the higher the concentration of antibiotic, the wider the clear area produced. Okay, next we look at this. Another example to study the size of the marble on the rate of reaction. So the size of the marble referring to the manipulated, and then the responding is the rate of reaction. So you can write down the smaller the size of marble, the higher the rate of reaction. Or you can write down as the size of marble increases, the rate of reaction increases. In writing the hypothesis, we need to avoid using the words influence or effects. Like this, for example, you write the rate of reaction is influenced by the size of marble, or you write down the size of marble affect the rate of reaction. So in the marking scheme of SPM, you cannot write the word influence or the words effects in writing the hypothesis. Next, we move on to how to write the observation. How to write the observation. So observation, you only need to illustrate what can be seen on the table or diagram. So example that you can write is the part condition. You can see the emitter needle, whether deflects or not, or the color change, or the shapes, or the productions of gas bubble or not. So the observation can also be write in the form of comparison. So when you write in the form of comparison, you need to write, or you only need to write what you observe. Okay, hanya tulis apa yang Anda boleh lihat pada diagram. Okay, for example, this is the questions that given. Okay, they given you two test tube, one with the complete culture solution, the other one with the culture solution without phosphorus. So write down one observation. So from these two test tube, you can see the first one Q, the seedling Q is green, the leaves of the seedling is green, and then for the X here, the leaves of the seedling is yellowish. So you can write the example of observation like this. Color of leaves of the seedling Q is green, and the color of leaves of seedling S is yellowish. So this is what you can see from the diagram, right? So this is the way you write observation. Okay, or you can write down another observation. You can see the roots of the seedling, right? The seedling Q have more roots than the seedling X. So this is how you write observation. Okay, or this one, can we accept this one? Seedling Q is healthier than the seedling X. Can we write like this? Okay, the answer is not. We cannot write like this, because you cannot see whether which one is healthier. Okay, so this is the way you write the observation, write what you can see from the diagram. Okay, let's look at this example. Another example they write shown here to compare the reactivity of metal L and also metal M with the dilute hydrochloric acid. So example of the observation you can write. Actually, you can observe from here. The first one is the volume of gas, right? Which one is more, which one is less. And then you can see the next one is the water level. So actually you can write down. The first one, what you can write? You can write the volume of gas collected in diagram 2B is more than the volume of gas collected in diagram 2A. Or you can write down metal M produce more gas. You see that metal M produce more gas than metal L. Okay, and then another one you can write down like this. The water level. Okay, referring to the water level now. So the water level in the period for the diagram 2B, this one 2B, is lower. Look at this. The water level is here, right? So it's lower than the water level in period for diagram 2A. So 2A, the water level is more comparing to the 2B. So what are the rejected answer? You cannot write like this for the observation. Metal M is more reactive than metal L. So if you write this, this is referring to the hypothesis, not the observation. For better understanding, I give you another example here. So this is the experiment to study the effects of temperature on the process of fermentation of glucose and the yeast. So you look at the table here. It is given with the table. So when the temperature is 37, the volume of gas is 30 cubic centimeter. And then when the temperature is 17, the volume of gas collected is 10 cubic centimeter. So how you write the observation here? So you can write down. The temperature of water bath, 37 Celsius degree, produce more gas than the temperature of water bath, 17 Celsius degree. Okay, or you can write down like this. The volume of gas collected by the temperature of water bath, 37 Celsius degree, is 30 cubic centimeter. So you can see from the table here, right? 30 cubic centimeter. Whereas the volume of gas collected in the temperature of water bath, 17 Celsius degree, is 10 cubic centimeter. This is also another way for you to write the observation. Next, we move on to the next sign process skill, that is the inference. So how to write the inference? So inference actually referring to the made a reasonable initial conclusion to explain an event. Means that you give the reason for the observation. Beri sebab kepada sesuatu pemerhatian. So example of the questions here. So this is the questions that I give the example just now for the observation. So I want you to look at this. So inference must match with the observation. Okay, why you get such observation, and then you give the reason why. For example, the example just now, right? You can see the observation here. You can see this one, the seedling Q, the leaves is green, and then seedling S, the leaves is yellow, right? So how to write the inference now? You need to give the reason why the seedling Q have the green leaves, and then while the seedling eggs, the leaves is yellowish. Okay, you just explain. So the example of inference that you can write down like this. Color of the leaves of seedling Q is green because seedling Q obtain all the necessary nutrients. Because you look at the test tube here, they containing the complete culture solution. So remember, there are two ways for you to write the inference. Either you just write the reason, or you can add with the observation in front. So like the example that I shown here. So the first part referring to what have been observed, that is the color of leaves of the seedling Q is green. And then at the back here, referring to the explanation on the changes, which is referring to the reason. So this is the short form. Kalau inference, you can write down observation plus reason. Ataupun you just write down reason there. Okay, next example just now, we look at this one. So this is a observation. The temperature of the water bath at 37 Celsius degree produce more gas when compared with the temperature of water bath at 17 Celsius degree. Why? Sebab dia, because you can write down is active at the optimum temperature, that is 37 Celsius degree. So there are two ways for you to write. Either you write down pemerhatian plus sebab, ataupun you just write down sebab only. Okay, Anat. Next, I move on to the next example. So this one is the experiment to study the water pollution level in the different water sample. So you can see from the table here, they've given you the time taken for the methylene blue solution to decolorize. So the river water that takes 30 minutes, tap water 240 minutes, and then for the pond water 60 minutes. So what are the observations you can write? So you can write river water had the shortest time for the methylene blue solutions to decolorize. This is the observation. And then the question asking about what is the inference. So you need to write like this. The oxygen contained in the river water is the lowest. Ataupun you write like this. The river water is the most polluted. Okay, so that is the how we write the inference based on the observation. Next, we move on to the another science process skill, that is classifying. Okay, so classifying means you need to identify the similarity and also differences, and then you need to collate the data based on the common characteristic. So for this example, you need to know these four types of microorganism. So P is the yeast, right? And then Q is the paramecium, and then R is amoeba, and then X is the muco. So you need to classify it into groups of fungi and also protozoa. And then for this one also example of classifying. So mark the food that can supply the highest calorific value to this age group. Okay, so highest calorific value you need to know. So cereal here referring to the carbohydrate, butter is the fat, and then papaya is the fiber, right? So among these three classes of food class, you need to know which one will contribute to the highest calorific value. So the answer is the fat, okay, butter. So the next science process skill that I'm going to discuss is how to do the prediction. So usually the prediction, they will ask you to predict from the graph. So for example, this question relate between the mass of the can and the time taken for the can to stop. So usually you need to predict the graph, do the prediction by using graph. For example, the question they want the mass can is 500 gram. What is the time taken, right? So 500 gram, what is the time taken? So you need to do the predictions from the graph. So next time process skill that I'm going to discuss is communicating. So communicating actually means you need to plot the graph based on the data in the table given. So you need to transfer the data from the table to the graph, and then mark the points on the graph by using X. Don't use a bullet. And then when there is a straight line, if the question requires you to draw the straight line, okay, you need to use a ruler. And then if it is a curved line, garis lengkon, you must not use the ruler. You need to use freehand drawing. Okay, remember this. And then for the bar chart and the histogram, usually the size of bar must be the same. The size of the bar must be the same. And then this is the example of the curved line graph. Like this, freehand drawing. Remember, this is a freehand drawing graph. And then, okay, this is the bar chart and histogram. Remember, bar chart, dia mesti asingkan graph dia. The graph cannot be combined together. So actually, this is referring to the discontinuous variation. Remember, bar chart. And then for the histogram, you must combine the graph together. And then usually referring to the continuous variation. So the next sign process skill is the relationship. How to write the relationship. Okay, so you look at this example. What is the relationship between the temperature of solution and the time in the first 6 minutes? So this is the graph that you plot, right? So we can write like this. The temperature of solution increase with the time in the first 6 minutes. Remember, if you want to use the word increase with, your responding variable must be put in front, then followed by manipulated variable. Okay, or you can write down another way, that is, as the time increases, the temperature of the solution increases. Okay, same to this graph. Okay, if the graph menurun, okay, you write down the temperature decrease with time, ataupun tulis suhu berkurang dengan masa. And then if the graph like this, okay, we can write directly proportional ataupun berkadar secara terus. You can write down the temperature increase proportionally with the time. Or you write down the temperature decrease proportionally with the time. So we look at this example. So if the question given you the graph like this and then they ask you to plot, so this is not a straight line graph, so you need to use freehand drawing only. And then the allocated marks here is 3 marks. So if you correct all the points, okay, you will score 2 marks. And then if only 4 or 5 points correct, you're only able to get 1 marks. And then the graph is smooth or not, okay, you will score another marks here. Okay, if the graph is only 2 marks like this, you need to know all the points must be correct in order to get 1 marks. And then the curved line, this is the curved line graphs, okay, you will get the marks for another curved lines. Okay. We continue with the next example. So based on the graph, step the relationship between the height of the dove and the time. So in order to write the relationship, make sure you need to identify the responding and also manipulated variable. So the height of the dove and also the time. So which one is the manipulated variable? Which one is the responding variable? I think you need to know first. So manipulated variable referring to the time, and the responding variable referring to the height of the dove. So when the time increases, the height of the dove also increases. So you can write like this. As the time increases, the height of dove increases. Apabila masa bertambah, tinggi dove bertambah. Or you can write down the height of dove increase with time. Kalau kamu nak guna perkataan increase with, make sure you need to write down the responding variable first, then followed by the manipulated variable. So the manipulated variable here is the time. So if you want to use the word increase with ataupun bertambah dengan, kamu mesti tulis pempelih ubah bergerak dahulu di depan. Baru increase with time. Time itu adalah pempelih ubah dimanipulasi. So we continue with another example. This one, step the relationship between the concentrations of antibiotic and the diameter of the clear area. So you need to know which one is the manipulated, which one is responding actually. So actually you can get the answer from the graph if the question asking you to plot the graph. Okay, so suggested answer you can write down: the higher the concentrations of antibiotic, the wider, the bigger, or the larger the diameter of the clear area. So these three words you can use. Either you use the word wider, bigger, or larger. So you cannot change these two variables, concentration of antibiotic and the diameter of clear area. These two variables must write in the relationship. Okay, another ways you can write as the concentrations of antibiotic increases, the diameter of the clear area increases. We move on to this example. What is the relationship between the daily calorie requirements and the age from 10 to 20 years old? So how to write the relationship? So daily calorie requirements are referring to the responding variable PB pemboleh ubah bergerak balas, and the age from 10 to 20 years old referring to the manipulated variable ataupun pemboleh ubah dimanipulasi. So you can write like this. If you want to use the word increase with, just now I mentioned already, you need to write the responding variable in front, then followed by manipulated variable at the back. So you can write like this. Daily calorie requirement increase with age from 10 to 20 years old. Ataupun dalam BM, you write down keperluan kalori harian bertambah dengan umur daripada 10 hingga 20 tahun. Okay, we look at the last sign process skill they always ask in the section A. That is operational definition. So this is also the most difficult part for the student to score. So how to write the operational definition. So when we write the operational definition, you need to write based on the result or the observation or referring to the responding variable. So biasanya untuk menjawab soalan definisi secara operasi mesti berdasarkan kepada keputusan ataupun pemerhatian ataupun merujuk kepada pemboleh ubah bergerak balas. You cannot give the definition based on the theory. Tak boleh memberikan definisi secara teori, mesti secara operasi. Apa maksudnya secara operasi? Maksudnya semasa kamu jalankan eksperimen tersebut, apa yang kamu nampak ataupun apakah yang telah anda lakukan. So you must write what have been observed and then what have been done. So you look at this example. Look at this example. So this is a table given the test tube P, Q, R, and then with the different pH, acidic, alkaline, and the neutral. And then the responding is the colourlessness of nutrient broth. So how to write the operational definitions for the growth of bacteria? So you need to write like this. The growth of bacteria. Salin, operational definition dia, pertumbuhan bacteria. So you write down the growth of bacteria is a process. Kalau dia ada proses, you write down process. Kalau dia bahan, kamu tulis bahan. Kalau dia adalah satu keadaan, kamu tulis keadaan. Okay, so here for the growth of bacteria is referring to the process. So the growth of bacteria is a process that causes. Biasanya kita guna perkataan dua ini yang menyebabkan. That causes the nutrient broth to become very cloudy when the nutrient broth is put at pH 7. So the nutrient broth to become very cloudy, you can get the answer from here, right? So very cloudy when the nutrient broth is put at pH 7. So what have been observed here, referring to this one, right? The nutrient broth to become very cloudy. And then what have been done, you already put the nutrient broth at the pH of 7 ataupun neutral. So this is a way how you write the operational definition. Remember, write what you have observed and then what you have done. Next example, look at this. So this is an apparatus set out to study the fermentation process. So the question asking you to write down step the operational definitions for fermentation. So how you write this, you can write down fermentation is a process that cause the lime water to become chalky. So you can see chalky lime water. This is what you observe, right, from the experiment. So you write down the lime water to become chalky when glucose solution react with the yeast. When you put the glucose solution into the yeast, you can see this, right? The lime water turn chalky. So this is how you this is the way you write the fermentation. Okay, ataupun dalam PM, penapaian adalah satu proses yang menyebabkan air kapur menjadi keruh apabila larutan glukosa bertindak balas dengan yeast. Okay, so untuk elakkan jawapan yang tidak betul, you cannot write like this. Penapaian is a process adalah satu proses yang menghasilkan alkohol, ataupun you write down yeast bertindak balas dengan larutan glukosa untuk menghasilkan alkohol melalui penapaian. So this is not the correct answer for you to write the operational definitions for fermentation. Next, we look at next example here. This is about also relating to the growth of bacteria. Okay, but this one, the factor they study is the presence of sunlight. Okay, so how to write the operational definitions for the growth of bacteria? So you need to write like this. The growth of bacteria is a process that produce many colonies. So actually both petri dish they have the bacteria, but you can referring to one only. Okay, either you're referring to the dark condition or you can referring to the bright condition. So you can write like this. The growth of bacteria is a process that produce many colonies when the petri dish is put in the dark. Okay, so the in front part here produce many colonies. This is what you can observe, right? And then what you have done, you put the petri dish in the dark. Okay, or you can write down another way. The growth of bacteria is a process that produce a few colonies when the petri dish is put in the bright. Also can. So still remember in the first two slides, I did mention that for each item, there is a question we tested on application, right? So this is the example of the application questions. So when the moving ceiling fan is switched off, it keeps spinning until it stops. Explain how the concept of inertia is applied in this situation. So this is an example of the application question that you need to answer. So the sample answer that you can write down. Spinning fan has a moving inertia and then has the tendency to maintain its original state, that is a moving state. Okay, another example of application question. Look at this. So this is the diagram shows a bicycle pump. Explain how a bicycle pump can function as a vacuum pump. So the suggested answer you can write down. When the piston at the pump is pulled, air is sucked into the bicycle pump. So the bicycle pump will function as a vacuum pump. I already discussed with you all about the 9 science process skills they always ask in section A. So now I will share to you the example of the questions for the section A. So we look at this question. So diagram shows experiment to study the Bernoulli principle. Okay, the question asking you to measure the height of the water level in diagram 3. So for this, you just measure the height. After you measure the height, you can write down the answer here. And then the units, usually they're given to you already. So the accepted answer for this, so your range of the answer can only be ranged from 1.3 plus minus 0.1. Maksudnya jawapan yang boleh diterima di sini adalah 1.2 and also 1.4 only. These three answers only accepted. If you more than 1.4 or less than 1.2, that means your answer is incorrect. Okay, next. On to this one, state one inference for this experiment. So the example of the inference that you can write, you need to know if the velocity of water is highest, the pressure become lowest, ataupun vice versa. Ataupun you can also write down the velocity of the fluid increases, its pressure decreases. Okay, next I move On to the next one. Step the responding variable in this experiment. So the responding variable here is the water level, or you can write down water pressure ataupun water velocity. Next, based on this experiment, state the operational definitions for the Bernoulli principle. So you need to able to write the Bernoulli principle. So by referring to this experiment, so the Bernoulli principle is a principle or the condition that cause the different water level when the water pass through the Bernoulli tubes. Okay, this is the way you answer the operational definition. Remember, write what you can observe and then what you have done. Okay, because you pass the water through the Bernoulli tube. Next, move on to this one. This is the application question. So, Bernoulli principle enable to lift up an aeroplane in the air. Which part of the aeroplane this principle is applied? So, this apply in the wings of the aeroplane. Okay, the next question is this one. To study the water pollution level in different water sample. They given you 3 samples here: river water, tap water, and the pond water. And then you can see from here the time taken for the methylene blue solution to decolorize. Understand? So the shortest time taken is the river water, followed by pond water, and then the longest time taken is tap water. So look at the questions now. Step 1, observation for the experiment. So you just write down what you observe from the experiment, means you get the answer from the table. So the example of the observation you can write down: river water take the shortest time for the methylene blue solution to decolorize. So the next question they ask about inference. You give the reason why the river water take the shorter times for the methylene blue solution to decolorize. So you can write down the oxygen content in the river water is the lowest, or you can write down the river water is the most polluted. Then number B, step the manipulated variable. So you can write down type of water sample. You just get it from the table, the left column referring to the manipulated variable. Next, we look at this one. Based on the experiment, state the operational definition for the water pollution level. So how to write this? So water pollution level is a level or the condition that cause the methylene blue solution to decolorize when put in different water sample. Okay, this is a way for you to write the operational definitions for the water pollution level. So we continue with the application question. They will ask for the section A. So this is an example. Diagram shows the phenomena of lags that happen near the agricultural farm. So in your opinion, why this phenomena happen? So actually this phenomena referring to the eutrophication, because excessive fertilizer flow into the pond, causing the algae bloom. So when the algae bloom, they cover the surface of the lakes, causing the sunlight cannot enter. At the end, all the aquatic organisms die. So what is the suggested answer you can write? You can write down excessive fertilizer such as the phosphate ion and the nitrous ion flow into the lakes. Okay, so this is 2 questions that I share with you. The question they come out in section A. So you remember, you need to know how to write the science process skill question and also how to apply, how to answer the application question like this. We still got the time, so I'll continue the discussion for the questions number 3. So this is the experiment to study the relationship between the temperature and the rate of reaction. So this is the chapter 4 in Form 5 syllabus. So this is the table given. The result of the experiment is recorded in table 1 here. So from this table, you need to plot a graph, draw a graph of the temperature against time. So after you plot, you will get the graph like this. So if all the points is correct, you will score 1 mark. And then for the smooth graph, you'll get another mark here. Okay, next. So make sure you plot the graph, you must using the freehand drawing. This is not the straight line, so use freehand drawing. Next, we move. B, state the relationship between the temperature and the time. So you can answer like this. The higher the temperature, the shorter the time. Maksudnya semakin tinggi suhu, semakin pendek masa. For C, what changes will occur to the rate of reaction when the temperature rises? So when the temperature rises, you can see the rate of reaction increases. How do you know that? Because when the temperature rises, the time taken for the reaction becomes shorter, means that the rate of reaction increases. Okay, D, why does the food stored in the refrigerator will not spoil easily? Mengapakah makanan yang disimpan di dalam peti sejuk tidak mudah rosak? So the low temperature in the refrigerator will slow down the growth of microorganism. Okay, ataupun kamu tulis suhu rendah di dalam peti sejuk melambatkan pertumbuhan mikroorganisma. Next, I move on to questions number 4. So diagram 1 shows the setup of apparatus to study the effect of nutrient deficiency on the growth of seedling. So the plant seedling are left to grow for 2 weeks. So this one is the experiment setup to study the effects of the nutrients deficiency. So you can see from these questions, they're given you 2 boiling tube. So the P is the complete culture solution, and then Q is the culture solution without potassium. So now we look at the questions. The result of the experiment is recorded in table 1. So this is a result of the experiment after 1 or 2 weeks. So the type of culture solution, here the first one is a complete culture solution, and then another one is the culture solution without potassium. Okay, so for the conditional leaves, for the complete culture solution, you can see from the table green color leaves, but for the culture solution without potassium, you can see the result there, the brown spot form on the leaves. So look at the questions there. What is the hypothesis in this experiment? So you need to know the hypothesis, you need to relate the manipulated variable with the responding variable here. So what are the suitable hypotheses you can write down here? So you can see here, one using the complete culture solution, the other one using the culture solution without potassium. So you can write the answer like this. Potassium is important, or you can write down needed for the healthy growth of plants. Ataupun kamu tulis dalam BN, kalium adalah penting untuk pertumbuhan sehat tumbuhan. Next, we move on to questions B. State the variable in this experiment. For the manipulated variable is the type of culture solution, right? From the table, you can get the answer already. And then for the responding variable is referring to the condition of leaves. So we look at C. Based on this experiment, state the operational definitions for the complete culture solution. So you need to start with the word complete culture solution. Is a solution that cause the green color leaves when the seedling is put into the complete culture solution. Still remember, I mentioned just now, you need to write down what have been observed. So what have been observed here is the green color leaves, right? And then what have been done. So what have you done for this experiment? So you put the seedling into the complete culture solution. Okay, so this is the what have been done. So make sure when you write the operational definition, write down what have been observed and then what have been done in this experiment. Okay, next we move on to the application questions. You are living at an apartment without land to plant the vegetable. Name another method to plant the vegetable without soil. That means you don't need to use the soil. Okay, how you are going to plant the vegetable. So the example of the answer you can write down hydroponic. Okay, hydroponic. Next, we continue with questions number 5. So diagram shows experiment to compare the elasticity of the natural rubber, rubber P, with a natural rubber that has been solved in the sulfur monochloride solution, which is the rubber Q. So at first, the initial length are the same. Both have the 10 cm of the natural rubber. Next, we move on to look at the diagram. So both rubber P and Q, they are hung with 500 grains of weight, and then after sometimes you remove the weight from the rubber. So you can see the rubber P still extend to become 12 cm, but the rubber Q still remain 10 cm here, right? So we look at the first question there. State the hypothesis that can be made from these questions or from this experiment. So what are the suitable hypotheses that you can write? So you can write down the elasticity of the natural rubber that have been solved in the sulfur monochloride solution is higher than the elasticity of the natural rubber Q. Or you can write down rubber Q is more elastic than rubber P. Next, we move on to the B. Step the variable in this experiment. So number one is control variable. So it's also known as the constant variable. So from the diagram just now, you can see that both of the natural rubber, they have the same initial length, that is 10 cm, right? So you can write down the length of the rubber strip. Another one is that you can see here, they hung 500 grains of weight. So both of the rubber, they are hung with 500 grains of weight. So the variable you can write down the mass of the weight or the length of the natural rubber strip. For the manipulated variable, so you can see rubber Q is salted with the sulfur monochloride solution. So you can write down like this, natural rubber salt or not salt in the sulfur monochloride solution. Okay, C, based on this experiment, which rubber is more elastic? So the rubber P and the rubber Q, which one is more elastic? So you need to know what is the meaning of elastic. Elastic means when you pull the rubber, they will become elongated, but once you release, they will return to the original size and the shapes we call elastic. So from the result of the experiment or from the diagram, you can see the rubber that is sold in the sulfur monochloride solution, they maintain the initial length, that is 10 cm, means that the rubber that is sold in the sulfur monochloride solution, they are more elastic compared to the rubber P, which is not sold in the sulfur monochloride solution. So you need to write like this, natural rubber that is have been sold in the sulfur monochloride solution, or you can just mention rubber Q is more elastic than the rubber P. Next, we move on to this one, application questions. Mark the objects which are made of the natural rubber that have been processed as in the rubber Q. So among these three products, so the first one, tires, tires, they are made from the rubber Q, and also this one, shoes sole, also made from the rubber Q. So actually the rubber Q we call the vulcanized rubber. I think that's all for my sharing today. So I hope after you watch this video, you are more clear about on the correct techniques in answering the section A, paper 2. So all the best to you all. Thank you. For better understanding, I did prepare two questions for you to answer as a revision exercise for you. So the first question is the experiment to study the growth of mucor on a bread. So you can look at the table here. This is the result after 5 days. So A, state one hypothesis that can be made from the experiment. Next, B, the question require you to draw a graph of the number of mucor colonies against time. So this one you can use your own graph paper to plot. Next, C, what is the relationship between the number of mucor colonies and time? And then D, predict the number of colonies muco produced on the 6th day. Okay, next, we move on to questions number 2. So diagram shows an experiment to study Bernoulli principle. A1, step 1, observation of the water level in the diagram. And then A2, you need to state the inference that can be made based on the observation. And then B, state the responding variable in this experiment. Next, move on to question C. State the operational definitions for the Bernoulli principle. And then D, mark in the box provided to show the apparatus where the Bernoulli principle is applied. So they given you 3 apparatus here, so you need to tick which apparatus here they apply the Bernoulli principle. So either you can copy this question and then you do it, or you can print out and then you may discuss the answer with your science teacher in the school. Thank you all for your attention.